Tetanus, diphtheria, rheumatic fever, smallpox is already there. Mumps, measles, chickenpox, all of those diseases used to kill off your ancestors. They didn't, and of course my ancestors were the ones that brought it over here, unfortunately. Community barriers, people are more likely to adopt health-enhancing behaviors when they are promoted by community organizations like Adabi, see, this is a big argument we got into yesterday. MMDR has decided that they're going to support domestic violence. So they're going to try to curb domestic violence by helping women who have been abused. And of course, MMDR has to do with murdered and missing.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not doing anything about murdered and missing. They're just going to do something about domestic violence. My assumption was that they were going to try to do something to slow down or at least stop or at least slow down the missing and murdered women, trafficking and murder that is happening. And of course, dealing with it at that stage doesn't stop anything. That's after the fact. That's when all the bad stuff has already happened. So I don't see that they're doing anything positive. Because what I want is to see the trafficking and murder slowing down. I want something to happen. But instead they're focusing on the tertiary aspect of all the problems. Anyway, that's what we got into yesterday. But they decided that that's the direction they want to go. They don't want to deal with, they can't deal with murdered and missing women, even though people have tried, because they would have they'd have to create an inner agency task force of some kind. They'd have to get law enforcement involved.
So are they like planning on putting workshops together for domestic violence? Like what?
No,
what
they're going to be supporting Adabi and whatnot. That's what they're planning on doing. Building houses in different communities so that people will have a place to go. That's it. I know. It's the same thing that they're still doing. We're going to solve the problem by not changing anything. See, that always works.
So in your opinion, why do you think that Native Americans just seem to be overlooked as far as statistics and like data that's collected?
Data is collected, tons of data.
As far as like that topic, missing
Right.
and murdered Indigenous women and relatives,
Right.
that when you look at it nationwide, there's not a lot of data about just how many Native Americans are missing, and it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's worse up in Canada, but it's really bad. It's bad here. And the reason is because most of the focus in the United States is east of the Mississippi River. That's always been that way. It's one of the reasons why they thought that they were helping you with all those boarding schools, and of course they were just messing things up worse. But nobody cared because they came up with a solution, they implemented the solution, and nobody was there to see how things turned out. All they did was they would get reports from whoever, you know, one guy decides that he wants to continue to be in charge, so he writes really nice reports to himself, about himself. The same thing is happening now. So who's in charge of law enforcement in Indian country? Who's in charge?
Actually, I have no idea, honestly.
It's kind of the FBI.
That's true.
The FBI is doing everything. I mean, they're trying to maintain law enforcement all over the United States. So their main focus is not what's happening on the reservation. It's just they don't have the personnel for it. Not only that, but we have a president that has decided but the FBI doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Yeah, so now we've got two problems. The president doesn't like the FBI, and the FBI is focused on everything. They're focused on terrorism, they're focused on all the criminal activity all over the United States. So how in the world can they focus on what's going on, you know, and this is really important stuff in Indian country. I mean, it's really, this is the most important thing. But when you've got people disappearing in Chicago, and you've got serial killers and mass murderers in Las Vegas and Atlanta, and, you know, all over the United States, focusing on missing and possibly missing and certainly murdered women in Indian country is tiny. It's just minuscule, and it's always been that way. It's always been that way. I mean, if we're focusing on all the people in the United States, we're talking about 316 million people, and if we focus on American Indians, we're talking about somewhere between 3 and 5 million people. So who are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on the ones that give you the money for first of all, but you're also going to focus on the ones that vote for the right people secondarily. So, I mean, that ain't you guys. So what you need to do is you need to create a political entity you need to start voting more as a block. And if you do that, then you can start controlling things. The only people that care about American Indians are the people that have American Indians in their states. So where do the American Indians live? They live in Montana. That's 2 senators and a member of the House of Representatives. They live in North Dakota. How many are we talking about? We're talking about 1 member of the House of Representatives and 2 senators again. South Dakota, exactly the same thing. Alaska, exactly the same thing. You're not talking about enough political entities that they would focus on you, unless you start voting as a block. If you start voting as a block, if you decide that you're either going to be Democrat or Republican and vote that way, the people in Arizona, the people in New Mexico, the people in Colorado, well, not Colorado, there's not enough natives there, North and South Dakota, I mean, all of a sudden you guys have become a block. And if that is what happens, then people will start listening to what your problems are. They'll start caring about your diabetes instead of paying lip service to it. The same thing that they're doing with the MMDR. The only way to get people to listen is for you guys to become a political entity, which may not be the easiest thing in the world, because there are conservatives here. Not only that, but there's an evangelical bent to some of the natives in Indian country, who tend to be relatively conservative. So, okay, it's your job, not mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, nice guy. I tell you what the problem is, and then I don't tell you what the solution is.
Well,
I told you what the solution is.
It's like a lot of these things that are being taught, like, and I guess it is different because we are on the reservation, so our perspective is different from off
Right.
the reservation.
Right.
So,
Remember when that little girl disappeared from Albuquerque? She was like 12 years old. And they knew that some guy snatched her. And all of the law enforcement all the way across the country were up in arms and ready to catch this guy that snatched this little girl in Albuquerque. And they caught him in Mississippi. Yeah. They caught him in Mississippi. Now the funny thing about the law enforcement in Mississippi, they don't integrate anything with anybody around them, because there's a degree of racism to them. Okay. But they were able to catch him in Mississippi. Now the point was that one little white girl disappears and everybody goes crazy. But one little native girl disappears, like the not afraid girl that disappeared up in Montana, and nobody cares.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I went to one of the MMDR meetings and they said that one of the thinking is that they voluntarily put themselves in those situations, so it's like
Like
go
risky
missing and murder.
behaviors.
And
Yeah.
thus keeping us in disposable and vulnerable states.
Mhm.
And that some of their forms aren't updated, and therefore people of color are being misclassified. So even the
Yeah, that is a
statistics can
problem.
be,
That's another problem.
yeah, it's underrepresented. And then, just that we're targets and our presence comes as a reminder of their neglect. So a larger cause of complicity.
Right. And you need to get your politicians to start doing something and start saying something. Now, John
Yeah.
McCain, just before he died, was starting to voice the concerns on the reservation. But of course, now he's dead and you've got a relatively conservative, an individual who wants to be reelected, and the only way she's going to be reelected is if she acts more conservatively, which means ignoring people of color. Because that is the political attitude right now. Political attitude is that Trump is in charge and Trump is being backed by the more white-focused groups in the United States. And then, yeah, I mean, all these ridiculous conspiracy theories about nonsense that law enforcement has done away with. I mean, of course, that he hates security services because they don't agree with it. So what you need to do is become a political entity.
Well, it's just interesting that, you know, all these things that I'm learning, just going to school here at Dene College and being more aware of indigenous issues. There's a really good reason why Native Americans just don't trust the government. You know, it's like,
Oh, sure.
we focus on all of these, helping all these other countries, but yet, like at Pine Ridge Reservation, more than half of that tribe, they don't have running water. What's the life expectancy on that reservation?
62, I think.
You know, and it's like, there's no help in those areas, and this is within the United States.
Sure.
Like,
course.
things like that.
Right.
I don't understand. So,
Yes, you do. You understand because it has to do with money. If it has to do with greed, and that's what that whole oil pipeline had to do with. It had to do with money. And if it has to do with money, then it's going to be really difficult for logic to be something that people follow rather than the money. They follow the money. Everybody wants money. That's why I'm here. It's for the money.
well, at least you're honest.
There you go. Yeah, you guys pay so well. That's why we can't find anybody else to come in. Yeah, Jeremiah was just, right over there. He's got a house over
It's
there.
the yellow water that keeps you here, Bruce.
Just help us dismantle the patriarchy and capitalism.
It is yellow, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's getting scary. And it's getting yellower in the winter.
We're
It
gonna
gets
be
yellow.
walking around like the Simpsons pretty soon.
You want to light up? Okay, so what's going on? Some environments promote health compromising behaviors such as alcohol use and binge drinking. They're more prevalent among college students than among their peers who do not attend college. So the people who drink the most are college students, as stupid as that sounds. These are the smart kids, right? Well, maybe not. Health system barriers. Medicine tends to focus on treatment rather than prevention. Early warning signs go undetected. Of course, this is one of the things they're screaming about right now, is the fact that Trump has already declared the coronavirus defeated in the United States. Well, if it's defeated already, we don't have to do anything about it. Thank God we're not going to have to spend any more money on the coronavirus. Whew. We were worried there for a minute. We were going to have to spend some bucks. So how did we keep the Ebola virus out? Remember there was that outbreak of Ebola virus in the United States about 5 years ago? How did we keep it out? Well, it cost us about between $5 and $8 billion to keep it out. Well, how much money are they putting into this coronavirus thing? $1.7 billion is what they're putting into it. Now, Ebola, we had like 5 cases in the United States, but we were able to keep it from killing anybody else. But coronavirus, we already have 38, I guess. 23 of them came off that one ship, that one cruise ship in Yokohama Harbor. And I found out yesterday, Trump's really pissed that they let those people come back to the United States. Even though they were Americans who were sick, and they had to do something. I don't know what he wanted them to do. Dump them in the ocean, leave them on a cruise ship?
I read an article that said it's not a matter of when, or not a matter of if, but when.
But when,
Mm-hmm.
it's
No.
absolutely correct. And we've got at least six more weeks of winter. He's thinking that it's gonna go away, just like SARS did. As soon as it turns warm, he thinks it's gonna go away, which is a possibility. I've predicted the same, well, I'm as smart as he, well, I am as smart as he is. But I predicted exactly the same thing, but we still have 6 weeks.
So is this
And
virus a lot stronger than like any virus or flu? Cause like in my lifetime, I'm pretty sure we went through this with swine flu, bird flu, Zika, West Nile,
Right.
Ebola, and
Sure.
then now this virus.
Right.
So
It's a pandemic at this point. It does kill people. Remember the hantavirus? Well, you
Yes.
don't. Oh, you do?
I have
remember.
forensic files, remember I brought it up?
Yeah, that's
I
right.
was like, hey, I know that place.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Right, okay.
Yeah.
So is it the same way? Yeah, it's a mutated form of coronavirus. We've been dealing with coronavirus forever.
Mhm.
You know, sure, I've come in contact with coronavirus, but it wasn't this mutated form.
Mhm.
So yes, it is a little bit more virulent than anything we've seen before. Who is it going to kill? That's the real question. Normally, these things kill the very young and the very old.
Mhm.
Okay, if that's the case, then we're okay, because we're not gonna lose any more people than we will with the flu. But if it's worse, if it starts killing, you know, 3rd graders or something, now we got a problem, because we're killing people's children.
So with the people that have died from it, is there like an age range or? if
Not
they-
that I've heard, well, see, that's the part of the problem, is that it's in China, and we don't know if
The
any of their
data.
demographics are any good, because the Chinese are like Trump, they lie all the time. Did I say that about the president?
Yeah,
He attacked the Supreme Court, 2 Supreme Court justices yesterday.
I just can't, Bruce, with that,
Don't.
I don't even
Yeah.
wanna hear that name, like, I don't need that negativity. It's just like, I don't know.
He said they should recuse themselves because they don't like him. Well, I don't like him, what am I gonna do, recuse myself? Leave the country? That's what he wants me to
Toss you
do.
on the ship.
He wants me to. I've been on somebody's shit list before. I was on Nixon's shit list, and I was in the military at the time. I kept getting the weirdest assignments, dangerous assignments. What are you talking about? Medicine tends to focus on treatment rather than prevention, and that's what's going on right now. We're focusing on treatment rather than preventing it from coming into the United States, because that will cost too much money. Economic forces undermine the efforts of healthcare workers to promote preventive measures. In 2010, 49,000 Americans did not have health insurance. The figure is actually closer to 58,000, or 58 million people. But let's just pretend it's 49 million. In 2017, despite the Republicans' attempt to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, the figure of uninsured in the United States was down to 28 million people. But because the Republican administration is bringing suit against the Affordable Care Act, It's gone up to 44 million. I just looked this up after last lecture. So as of 2020, we have 44 million Americans that don't have health care. The question is this going to become an issue in the next election? And if it does, then possibly Donald Trump, who wants to do away with the Affordable Care Act, will be defeated in the election. But right now, it doesn't look all that good. I watched the debates last night. The Democrats are devouring each other, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. The Democrats want Medicare for all, which I'm on Medicare, so yeah. So it would be everybody gets Medicare, which is not a bad deal. And it would, everybody would have health care in the United States. So we'll see what happens.
Isn't there a country that's like that?
Canada's that way, the Netherlands are that way, England's that way, France is that way, sure. Practically everybody gives free health care. We're like the only country that charges people for health care. And our health care is like 3 times as expensive as anybody else's.
I had no idea Canada was.
Yeah, it's healthcare for all. It's a pretty good
What's the
deal.
best place to move? China?
No, not with the coronavirus.
The Netherlands.
No.
Where are you going?
Do you like people?
Kinda.
It's like 1.8 billion people up there, so, over in China, so. It all depends on how much you like people. How much room do you need to live, anyway? It's not that big a country, 1.8 billion people. It's pretty crowded. I don't like crowds. I'm gonna stay here. High-risk family characteristics, overt conflict, deficient nurturing taking place in the family. Mom and dad didn't really want to be parents when they became parents, so they're not very good nurturers. Lots of conflict going on, mom and dad always arguing with one another. It's really surprising how debilitating this is for children. When they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, you think they don't understand what we're talking about. We're talking about sex, and you know, little kids don't understand about sex, but they do. They understand conflict, and unfortunately, that's what's going on. So if there's a lot of conflict in the family, then yeah, we got a big problem as far as the kids are concerned. They will think that this is normal behavior, that this is normal, that this is the way people are supposed to interact. And of course, they get distressed when mom cries, baby cries, you know, when dad gets angry, baby gets scared, you know, all of these things are taking place. Many health habits are acquired from the parents and other relatives. Parents who smoke are more likely to have children who will smoke. Obese parents are more likely to have obese children because their nutrition is poor. Problem drinkers are more likely to have children who abuse alcohol. And of course, I've never been a drinker, and both my parents were teetotalers. Well, that's not completely true. My dad would go off to, my dad was in the Army Reserve, and whenever he went off for his 2 weeks tour during the summertime, he would take a bottle of whiskey. And when he came back, it was like there was this much left in the fifth of whiskey. So he drank when he was in the Army, but he drank when he was during World War II, he drank overseas, thinking, geez, will I ever come back? I might as well get drunk. Injury is the leading cause of death among children between the ages of 1 and 44. So I have 5 brothers and sisters, and none of us are drinkers. None of us are. But then again, 2 teetotalers in the family. And my mother used to tell the most god-awful stories about working in the emergency room and having drunks coming in without fingers and eyes, and their nose had been chopped off, and you know, all that fun stuff. And they didn't feel it because they were drunk, and they didn't know that they were missing a foot or whatever. The use of, I know my mother, she was a lot of fun. And I really enjoy these stories, but my sister, every time she tells these stories, she'd curl up in the corner. Oh, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. What a candy ass. What a wimp. The use of the terms injury and trauma have replaced accident. 3 accepted strategies for injury prevention programs are education and behavioral change, legislation and enforcement, and engineering and technology. So if we're talking about getting drunk and wrecking your car, of course, we can now tell you, we can educate you and tell you not to do that, like my mother did when I was a kid. We can legislate that the drinking, you have a DWI if you have an alcohol of 0.08. We can enforce it. We can stop people and check their blood alcohol level. We can change our engineering and our technology to the extent that now they have breathalyzers in select. We can put breathalyzers in cars, and if somebody has an blood alcohol above 0.08, they can't turn on the car. We have that capability of doing that. So we have the capability of stopping people from driving when they're drunk. 80% come from working families. We're talking about the uninsured people now. 80% come from working families. Only 27% come from families with income below the poverty level. The reason is because if you are below the poverty level, you can get Medicaid. So the vast majority of people, but there are different Medicaid laws all over the United States. So if you live in select places like Mississippi, if you want to go on Medicaid, you have to work, and you have to work for the state, as stupid as that sounds. But there's a problem with that. So there are some people that can't get Medicaid, but there's a problem with that because some people can't work. Well, why can't they work? They have a disability, which keeps them from working. They have a mental illness that keeps them from working. Maybe they have 5 kids under the age of 7, and so they have to take care of their kids. They can't go out and work, so they can't get Medicaid, as stupid as that sounds. Single adults are at high risk. 45% cite the high cost of insurance as the main reason. And if you remember what happened when the ACA was first passed, they had a law that everybody had to buy in to the ACA, to the Affordable Care Act, which has since become Obamacare, or what they refer to as Obamacare. In the beginning, of course, that was the law. So all of these people were supposed to buy in to the insurance, and there were a lot of people that complained about it. They tried to get Obama impeached because of it. There were just a ton of ugly political things that were taking place in the United States. And now, of course, because this was a cause that the conservatives embraced, this became a cause for Trump, and that's one of the reasons why he's tried to do away, I'm sorry, I said Trump again, why he tried to do away with the Affordable Care Act is because of some of these negative things. And of course, this only affected a relatively small percentage of the population, but they tried to do away with it anyway. I don't know if you remember the vote they had in the Supreme Court, and they won by 1 vote. They almost did away with the entire ACA, which would have meant that 18 million people were thrown out of health care. They would have lost their health care, and it passed by 1 vote, or it was defeated actually by 1 vote, trying to do away with the Affordable Care Act. The group that is the most likely to be uninsured are the people between the ages of 19 and 34. They think they're too healthy to need health insurance. If they don't have health insurance at their work, then these are the people that don't want to buy health insurance. One provision in the Affordable Care Act is that an individual can stay insured on their parents' program until the age of 26, which is not a bad deal. But unfortunately, it means that people have to stay around their parents until they're 26 years old. I don't know about you guys, but I left home at 17, and I haven't been back since. So I went away to college at 17. Did I still have insurance with my dad? Yeah, I still had insurance with my dad, but I was in college. The majority of the uninsured come from working families. Uninsured workers are more likely to have low-wage or blue-collar jobs and to work for small firms or in the service industry. And of course, my son and daughter were both, my son was a bartender and my daughter was a waitress. And of course, they didn't have any health insurance at their jobs. And they made, all they made were tips. I mean, that's how they were being paid. They weren't really being paid a wage, not a living wage anyway. And of course, that was a tough one. Sometimes they did okay because people tipped them well, but sometimes they didn't do very well, and that's because people were cheap. I noticed here, everybody tips $1. $1. So you buy $100 worth of food and they serve it to you and you tip them $1. Okay, that's pretty chintzy, I would say. My wife always makes me tip, she wants me to tip 15%, but I always tip either 20 or 30%. Not because I'm rich, but because I remember my poor children complaining about all the assholes that didn't tip very well. I don't want to be one of those assholes. 30.1% of the uninsured individuals are Hispanic, 19.5% of the uninsured are African American, 16.1% of the uninsured are Asian, and 10.1% of the uninsured are European American. But the reality is, of course, 10.1% of European Americans is a lot more than 30.1% of Hispanics, as far as the numbers are concerned. A lot more white people aren't insured than Hispanic people. But if we look at the percentages, there are more of the Hispanic people are uninsured than the white people. So if we were painting a picture of the uninsured in the United States, what would their complexion be? What color would their hair be?
Black.
They'd be African American? Brown? They'd be brown? No, they'd be white. There's 70% of the population's white. 10% of that's like, I don't know, 7 million. I don't know what it is. Anyway, yeah. Massachusetts is a state that is the least likely to have uninsured people at 5%. Do you guys remember why Massachusetts has so few uninsured people? The Affordable Care Act came out of Obama didn't come up with it. It was developed by the governor of Massachusetts. Do you remember who the governor of Massachusetts that developed this plan was? This is the funny thing. It was Mitt Romney. It was Mitt Romney. It was a Republican plan. And the Republicans couldn't get behind it because, well, it just cheated everybody, just like Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts. The state of Texas has the highest percentage of uninsured people at 27%. Any idea why? Why Texas? What's wrong with Texas? Why do they have so many uninsured people? They're a right-to-work state. But that's not the reason why. They have almost half the population in Texas is Hispanic. And remember, 30.1% of the Hispanics do not have any insurance. And it's because of states like Texas that don't force you to buy insurance. Some areas of the country encourage their citizens to exercise. The healthiest state in the union has been Colorado for a really, really long time. This isn't the way it is now, and the reason is because they've legalized marijuana. And because of that, the exercise level in Colorado has gone way, way down. Well, I mean, if you're mellow, why would you go out and run? Can you run? I'm not exactly sure if you can if you're like stone. You might run into a rock or something. Ooh, it bounces. Did you see it? I hit it and I made an imprint in that rock. Yeah, okay. Austin, Texas has built neighborhoods around green energy and open areas to exercise. Sleep may be the elixir of health. This is a hint and a warning to those of you who burn the candle at both ends. 1 in 5 adults experience sleep deprivation that may be caused by sleep disorders such as insomnia, narcolepsy, sleepwalking, and sleep apnea. I was just talking to somebody about sleep apnea. I'm pretty sure they have sleep apnea. Over the last year, this guy has like aged 5 years. And I keep telling him, he won't listen to me. He needs to get his heart checked too, but I can't convince him to do that. Anyway, he needs to get checked. This can kill you. Sleep apnea kills people.
What are the signs of sleep apnea?
Tired, grouchy, you lose your libido, all kinds of horrible things happen. The libido part is the part that bothers me the most. My wife had sleep apnea, okay? She gained weight, she couldn't lose weight. They diagnosed her with rheumatoid arthritis. She had a sleep apnea test. Now she gets 8 hours of sleep. Turned out she was only getting 3, 4, 5 hours because she was cutting off her airway. And she was aging, like all these horrible things happened to her. Any problem that you potentially have, physical problem that you have, will be exacerbated if you don't get enough sleep because your body can't repair itself. And she was in really bad shape. I mean, she was going downhill fast. So we got her checked. Well, the truth is I'm the dumbest person in the world and she knows it. So if I tell her to do something, she will do the opposite. So I was telling her for years that she snores like crazy, like a freight train. And I told her, you snore like a freight train. And she didn't believe me. And then she slept over at my daughter's house one night, and my daughter said, you snored so loud that we had to close the door and you scared the dog. One time, I've been telling her for years that she snores like a freight train, and she didn't listen to me. So finally, because my daughter said that she snores, she finally went and got herself checked. Her sleep apnea was horrible. I mean, it was really, really bad. And she looked like she was aging really, really fast. She couldn't lose weight. She was starting to get arthritis. She had to have both of her hips replaced. I mean, all this horrible stuff was taking place. She'll probably watch this and shoot me.
First time
Well, that was the first one. This one will shoot me. So now she's walking. She couldn't exercise before. She couldn't walk across the room. And now she's walking. She's going to the gym and walking. She's swimming. Her arthritis is gone. All of her problems have just gone away because of the sleep apnea. The problem is people snore and they don't want to admit it. As stupid as that sounds, you snore. Now, why in the world would anybody care? So, and the other problem is they get to put on this really ugly mask. You know, they look like a wrestler with one of those masks on. It's really kind of funny. But anyway, sleep apnea. Yeah, it's really bad stuff. You need to get it taken care of. Not you. I don't know.
I'm fine.
Okay. Stress or demand, you need to get 8 hours of sleep a night. And you know whether you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night. How often are you waking? She was waking up to pee every hour. You know, it was really just crazy. And every night she's getting up. And some nights, and she hates me. She hates me. I just admitted my wife hated me. My wife hates me because I'll go right to sleep. I mean, when I lay down and put my head on the pillow, I'm gone. And she hated me because she'd sit there and watch me. And she'd glare at me. And I'm just, I'm sleeping. And
So do you hear her snoring when you're sleeping?
No, I don't. No, hell no. I block it out now. Well, not now. She has the mask on now. But even before, I didn't hear her because we got in arguments about it before, and I didn't want to start a fight, so I just slept right through it. The freight train. I've slept through artillery barrages before, okay? So I can sleep if I need to sleep. But she hated me because I went to sleep, and she couldn't. And she'd get up and she'd read, or she does the crossword puzzles in the newspaper, and I do the Sudokus, you know, those number things. She'd get up and she'd do all my Sudokus. Because she's mad at me, she's doing my games. Anyway, it was funny. She's okay. She's all right. Now she wears the mask, and she's okay. Stress or a demanding work-study schedule, all of these things can cause sleep deprivation. Sleep debt promotes increased body weight. It suppresses immune function, and this is the problem that she was having. She was not a healthy person. She just couldn't be healthy because she didn't get enough sleep. The effects can mimic accelerated aging, and that's what was happening to her. And she was starting to say, "You look so young, I hate you," you know, that kind of stuff. She's 3 years younger than I am, and she was looking 10 years older than me. And that really upset her. She got pissed. Studies have shown that the teenagers are not getting enough sleep. One school district in Minnesota moved their start time till later in the morning to give their students more of a chance to sleep in. This is what teenagers needed to do. They started eating breakfast. They had improved in attendance. There was less tardiness, greater alertness in class, calmer school atmosphere, fewer disciplinary and counseling referrals. Because they changed the time of when the school started. Now, so why in the world do we make the kids go to school at 7 o'clock in the morning? Why would we do that? That's the way they do it in Florida. Why would we do that?
We done by fire.
So the teachers can go home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And you're kind of right. It has to do with extracurricular activities. They want to do their sports so that, I don't know. They should do their sports so that parents can go to the games. That's what they should do.
Sports from the school.
Sports are more important than academics. Everybody knows that. Health education is, that's why they do it. And that's why they didn't want to change the time. So my son teaches in Florida, and he goes to school at 6:30 in the morning. And they start at 7:10. And my daughter teaches in Iowa, and they were starting at 8 o'clock or 8:30, and now they start at 7:30. So they're actually moving it farther back, which is the wrong thing to do, unless they want to change kids' sleeping patterns. But sleeping patterns for teenagers is changing because of video games and telephones and iPads and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, technology.
What about like food, like processed food?
You think that has something to do with it? All those jerky that people are eating with drinking and downing it with a Code Red? Monster. What am I talking about, Code Red? That doesn't have enough caffeine in it. It's Monster, Rockstar, 5-hour energy drink. That's what they're doing. Health education is any planned intervention involving communication that promotes the learning of healthier behavior. Proceed model identifies specific health problems in a community. It identifies lifestyle and environment elements that contribute to the targeted behavior. It analyzes background factors that predispose, enable, and reinforce these lifestyles and environmental elements. The proceed model implements a well-designed health education program, and this is good stuff. Okay. Campaigns that merely inform people of the hazards of certain behaviors, such as anti-smoking messages, are typically ineffective. Kids are going to smoke anyway. They don't believe them. We haven't really done this with marijuana, but we have done this with meth, and we have done this with tobacco. But the tobacco didn't work. The meth did, and there's a reason why the meth was successful. People that use crystal meth, they either stop or they die. That's the way it works. So a lot of those people just kind of fell out of the gene pool, and that's okay, that's the way it works. There's nothing we can do about it anyway, right? They fell out of the gene pool, they died. Okay, so they're not going to reproduce. They died before they reproduced. Sometimes they reproduced anyway. Multifaceted campaigns that present information on several fronts are generally more effective than single-shot campaigns. An important factor in health education is the wording used or the framing of the message. A gain-framed message focuses on attaining positive outcomes or avoiding undesirable ones by adopting a health-promoting behavior. If you exercise frequently, you will look and feel better. That's a positive message. The negative message would be, if you exercise regularly, you will be less likely to be obese or suffer from chronic diseases. So what image are we trying to give these people? The first one is trying to give you a positive image, and the second one is trying to give you a negative image that you don't want. And that works. Loss-framed message focuses on negative outcomes from failing to perform a health-promoting behavior. If you don't exercise, you will be more susceptible to debilitating diseases. That doesn't work. If you don't exercise, you won't have the extra energy that exercising provides. That's a little bit more positive message. Tailored messages are customized to the individual characteristics of the recipients. Not yet. Okay. The loss-framed fear message is a health message that focuses on the negative outcomes from failing to perform a health-promoting behavior. So if we were going to try to convince people on the reservation to vote, which they tried to do last week, what would we tell them? How could we get them to actually go out and vote? We've got Kevin that doesn't want to vote ever. So how are you going to convince this guy that he needs to vote, and it's not just his national responsibility, but his Dene responsibility? He will be a bad Dene if he does not vote. How do we convince him of that? Do we tell him you're going to be a bad Dene unless you vote? Will that work? I don't know. Do you vote?
I don't know, sometimes.
You will this time. Haven't you been listening to what we've been saying about Donald Trump? My God. You've got to vote. If you don't vote, he's going to win again. It's going to be your fault. Because of you, Donald Trump's a president for a second term. You think I'm kidding? Okay. I'll vote, you vote, well, let's all vote. Let's all vote. You can vote any way you want. Do you think Donald Trump's the best thing since, I can't think of anything good, so if you think he's a great president, go ahead and vote for him. Just vote. So how are we going to convince him to vote? See, he votes sometimes.
You just tell them there's gonna be roast mutton there.
Yeah.
After you vote, you get a roast mutton sandwich. That's how you hook them in.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
You feed him? I don't
That's
know.
a guarantee right there, Bruce.
Yeah, free stuff.
Is that right?
Green
Okay.
chili.
Uh,
I'd be there
For the chili?
for the whole roast mutton.
Okay.
Got my vote.
So who's gonna be the candidate for the Democrats? Did anybody see the debate last night? It was a screaming match. It was horrible. I don't know. Scare tactics that arouse fear may backfire and decrease a person's likelihood of changing his or her beliefs and behavior. A key factor in determining the effectives of threatening health message is the recipient's perceived self-efficacy regarding the behavior. Loss-framed fear appeals are more effective in promoting illness detection behaviors. So the question is, did this work? Did the anti-meth campaign work? Isn't that ugly?
It's, I've, like, there, man, it's
Yeah,
just, it's messed up.
What, this?
No, like to see somebody before they were on that stuff and then just
See them afterwards?
It's like, it's not even the same person, it's really something.
Do you think it keeps people from doing it? Meth is one of those substances that if you use it one time, you're addicted to it. And of course, this young lady is selling herself for $15. Messages that aroused moderate levels of fear were more effective than more extreme messages, as was discovered with a junior high audience. Before the messages can be accepted, the recipient must feel that they have some degree of control over the behavior. And of course, this one does give you the idea. This is the meth campaign that they had up in Montana. Meth was a horrible, horrible problem when I first arrived there. Something happened in the 10 years that I was there, and it wasn't a problem. Not nearly the problem it was when I first got there.
What year was that?
I got there in 2001. And when practically all my students were on meth. It was freaky. Because I'd be lecturing and they're scratching themselves and they're all just skinny as minutes. They look like I had a whole class full of anorexics. I mean, it was horrible. And they would get up and they'd leave. And they'd be gone for like 15 or 20 minutes, and then they'd come back and sit down, and they're fidgeting the whole time. I mean, it just made me nervous trying to talk to these people. But by the time I left, obviously it was me, and we fixed almost everything. Didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with these kinds of campaigns. And as you can see, she's got a guy on top of her, and she looks like she's having a really good time. Nobody even wants to go to the bathroom, okay, in this toilet, but it says no one thinks they'll lose their virginity here. Meth will change all that. Yeah, that's now. You can look at it and smell it. It smells like old urine is what that place smells like. And probably unflushed feces. Don't think about it. Actually doing that, so most of the campaign had to do with females. It really did, because they didn't want they wanted everybody to stop. But they were focusing on getting females not to do this stuff. Because what was happening was there was a lot of trafficking taking place. There was a lot of really ugly stuff was going on in Montana. Billings and Great Falls became centers of, all the young girls, the 15-year-old girls from the res would come down, and it was just ugly. It was just horrible. A lot of the motels turned into brothels. It was just nasty. Actually doing meth won't make it easier to hook up because you look like that. Before meth, I had a daughter, now I have a prostitute. Beating an old man for money isn't normal, but on meth it is. They have a lot of respect for the elderly up there. That's part of the Northern Plains thing. So this was really impactful as far as these kinds of advertisements were concerned, that they would attack an old man just for his money. Occupational health psychologists are either health psychologists or industrial organizational psychologists who work to design healthy workplaces. Dimensions of healthy work, controlling stress, improving work-family relations, violence prevention, improving relationships at work. Behavioral crossover effects are when frustration from the workplace are brought into the home environment. Negative emotion spillover occurs when a negative workplace event creates negative behavior at home. So because your boss yelled at you, now you go home and beat your kids or kick the dog or
Or
smoke meth. Social withdrawal occurs when a worker allows their frustrations from work to lead to their withdrawal from the family through substance abuse or emotional numbing, of course. And that's one of the problems with meth. It's very numbing. The individual doesn't care about their family anymore. If you use meth, that's the most important thing in the world. Far more important than your kids. Kids are the last thing they can take care of themselves. 9-month-olds can take care of themselves. They can find their own food. And of course, this is a problem. Up north, they have house parties where they have meth at the house parties. And of course, people will bring their kids and they'll put them in the back room, one of the bedrooms, and then everybody else will be doing whatever everybody else is doing. Well, sometimes these house parties will last for days. And there's no food because, well, nobody needs it, because they're all on meth. They're all getting drunk. So I had a student, and her sister had 2 kids. One was 18 months old and the other was 2.5. And she had a house party one weekend, started on Thursday night. And on Sunday night, the party was winding down. So Monday, the grandparents came over to make sure everything was okay. They knew it was taking place. This is the bad part. They knew it was taking place. They found the 2 kids in the back room. One of them was drinking a beer. The 2.5-year-old was drinking a beer because there was no food. And these kids hadn't eaten or had their diapers changed all weekend because nobody paid any attention to them. Turned out that somebody had molested both of them. They were molested. They had been molested. So they took the kids away from the mother because she was the one, it was her house. And she was the one that was having the house party. And so they took them away from her and they gave them to the grandparents. And guess what happened next? Well, they couldn't believe that their daughter didn't care about the kids. So they gave them back. And there was a house party the next weekend, and guess what happened? They both got molested again. And they didn't get fed for the whole weekend again. And so then they took them away from them. And of course, they have to give them to a relative. They couldn't give them to the grandparents, so they gave them to my student. She was living on another reservation, but they gave them to her. And everything was fine for a while, and then the grandparents talked her into giving them back to the kids back to the mother, because she's a mother. You know, all mothers are good mothers. Isn't that the way it works? No, it doesn't work that way. Neither of the kids ended up dead, but both of them ended up molested over and over and over again because meth evidently makes you stupid. Yeah, well, it makes you real stupid anyway. What are we doing here? Behavioral crossover effects are when frustration from the workplace. Why did you even talk about that? The emotional numbing, that's what, okay. Workplace homicides have become the second leading cause of death after occupational injuries. While 90% are type 1 incidents caused by robberies, so if you work at a corner store, a grocery store, a gas station, of course, they're going to come in and rob you, and then they may shoot you or whatever, hit you in the head, whatever. So that's where most of the injuries come from, the type 1 attacks. 10% can be attributed to violent acts of the clients, that's type 2. Violent acts of a former or current employee. Of course, that's what happened in Peoria, Illinois. I don't know if you remember, the guy, he got fired, and he pulled out his pistol, he pulled out his Glock 13, and with the laser thing on top, and he started shooting people, and he shot everybody in the building because he had just gotten fired. The former or current employees or domestic violence spilling over in the workplace. One time I was working, and this lady's boyfriend came in, and we were drawing blood. It was a trauma center, and here we had all these guys that needed to go draw blood, and he wouldn't get out of the doorway because he was having an argument with his significant other, and he just blocked the doorway. And this is big guy, really big guy, and I couldn't move him. I'm just a little tiny wimpy guy. I can't move him. We called security. It took 5 security people to pull him out of the doorway. It took us a half an hour. And we had all of these emergencies taking place. We had people dying in ICU. We had babies dying in ICU. We had people in the emergency room that we needed to go draw. And we couldn't get him out of the doorway. And finally, of course, tased him and got him out of the doorway. But it took 5 people to move that guy. Domestic violence spilling over into the workplace. What were they arguing about? What she had fixed for supper that night. She knew that he didn't like sausage. And, you know, I'm using all my charm to get this guy out of the doorway. You know, nobody likes sausage. You know, it's one of those kind of deals. I don't blame you for being mad. Why don't you come on in and we'll talk about it? No. And you know why I didn't like sausage? Well, I'm not going to tell you why I didn't like it. Think about it, though. How is this sausage shaped? That's why he didn't want to eat sausage.
Was he in prison?
Hey,
He had been in prison. Yeah.
and he was working at a hospital?
No. He wasn't working at all. He'd just gotten out of prison, as a matter of fact. But he was this lady's boyfriend.
And she worked at the hospital?
And she worked at the hospital, yeah. And she's screaming at him over here. Well, if I chop this stuff up, you wouldn't mind eating? I don't understand why you won't eat it, you know. Just it was trying to feed it to him in a sandwich. I guess he didn't eat hot dogs either. As stupid as that is. Worksite wellness programs are ideal for promoting health because of convenience for workers, opportunities for social support, follow-through, and feedback. Successful programs are voluntary and related to behaviors of interest. They include health screenings, they ensure confidentiality, they have company support and are convenient, and they offer incentives for successes. This is really kind of interesting. My brother used to work for Red Gold. Red Gold. You know what Red Gold is? They make they're tomato canners in Indiana. Anyway, he used to work for this company, and the wife of one of the guys that owned the company decided that the people at the job were too fat. They were too obese. So she started this program where she bought everybody a meter. What am I thinking of?
Fitbit?
Well, it wasn't a fit, no, she didn't buy him a Fitbit. She just bought a pedometer. She bought everybody a pedometer. And she wanted everybody to walk 10,000 steps every day. So, and if you didn't reach your goal over an extended period, they fired them. They fired them for being unhealthy. So my brother would go out and for lunch, instead of eating his lunch, he would go out and he would walk around this track they had on the property.
Isn't that the case here on campus?
What?
Like, to have a healthy environment?
So we should all have
Like for the employees?
a pedometer?
Not the donor, but like they all go down to the weight room, they all work out, or they walk and run.
How many people that work here have you seen at the weight room?
Like, the people at the registrar's office, and then.
LA? You've seen LA over there?
Bruce, he's all I want names.
And like,
I know you've only seen like 2 people over there.
Like,
One of them is me and the other one is
Hey,
Jeremiah.
the other one of them hits me.
And I'm only over there on Thursday nights.
and then DPI, they all go there.
I never see anybody, but, well, I see
Like everywhere is closed.
well, it's not even open on the weekends anymore.
Really?
Yeah,
Not that I ever went, but.
yeah. Now you want to go because you can't
Now,
go.
see, now I was just about to start and then they want to close it.
This weekend.
Dang.
Yeah, this Sunday we're gonna go over there. Damn it. Why do they do these kinds of things? No, they don't have a program like that. The cops, sometimes I see the security over there. There's that one guy. I saw that one guy lift 10 plates. He
Alfonso?
squatted 10, I'm sorry?
Alfonso?
Yeah. 10 plates.
Yeah, he's crazy.
That's almost 500 pounds. He squatted it 3 times. I was amazed. I've never, well, I don't work my legs anyway. Successful programs, voluntary, okay, we talked about that before. Okay, I talked about my brother. So he used to go, instead of eating his lunch, he would go out and he would walk. It was funny. He used to run cross-country when he was in high school, but I don't know. I keep giving him shoes and his wife won't let him run. She doesn't want him to live longer than she does. She will live, well, anyway, she wants him to die first. Positive psychology is a strength-based preventive approach to research and interventions. Positive psychology has only been around since about 2001. Now, I've been teaching positive psychology for about 30 years, but the APA didn't pick it up until 2001. I think positive psychology is a really good idea. I think you guys need to, if you have a positive mindset, you're more likely to live a long and healthy life. The APA began promoting the positive mental health program with their mission statement in 2001. The previous approach was to react to problems after they occurred. In other words, all we focused on was people being nuts. And once they became nuts, then we tried to treat them. That was it. That's all psychology used to be. I have a textbook, an abnormal psychology textbook from 1975. You ought to see this thing. It's crazy. It is crazy. Because it doesn't really explain anything. And the types of schizophrenia in there, it is a hoot. Because anything that exists today, except for paranoid schizophrenia, didn't exist back then. It was funny. They had a thing called hebephrenic schizophrenia, where people draw pictures of horrible, god-awful things, like severed heads and bloody knives and whatnot. And that was hebephrenic schizophrenia. We were putting people in asylums, mental hospitals, because they were drawing pictures of blood, as stupid as that sounds. But that's the way it was. I mean, we could diagnose them with hebephrenic schizophrenia.
Was this during that time when that hospital was open at Penhurst?
Yes. Yeah, this is back in the 70s.
Have you seen that movie, One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I've never seen it.
Oh, that movie really
I hate to watch movies about psychology.
So like the epidemia during that time, does it compare to today?
We were hospitalizing a lot more people back then. Well, aren't hospitalizing anybody anymore because they closed all the mental hospitals. And the reason they did that is because it was too expensive.
Well, not only that, they were like raping the patients that had mental disabilities.
Oh, please.
What? Tell it to the person who was raped.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's not why they closed them, because of
But
all the raping taking place.
I mean, just the things that happen in that time.
I saw Kill Bill.
I've never seen that movie.
You haven't missed it,
But
yeah.
what was the deal with the shocking the brain or the?
Yeah, electroshock.
Yeah. What was the purpose of that?
Electroshock therapy is so painful that you change the way your brain works. Theoretically, it rewires your brain in a more socially acceptable manner.
Can it cause, like, if somebody was shocked for a really long time, could it cause like permanent
Oh, yeah.
brain damage?
Well, sometimes it does it after one episode.
So I was thinking maybe that's what had happened in that movie. But anyway, you have to see it. It's an old movie. It has
Oh,
Jack
One
Nicholson
Flew
in
Over
it.
the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yeah.
Doesn't the native guy kills the star? It's
Yeah,
Jack Nicholson.
because they gave him that
Oh,
therapy,
that
even though he
frontal
wasn't
lobotomy.
crazy. But because he was causing problems.
Right.
And they did it to the extent where he was brain dead.
Sure.
And so the guy didn't want him to live that way,
Right.
and so he killed him.
Yeah.
Which he died in real life, and it just makes it that much more.
Have you seen Joker?
No.
So it's a really good movie.
Is Joker really good?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you gotta watch it.
Okay, I gotta watch it. I can't wait. The new approach emphasized being proactive or preventing mental illness, and of course that's what we try to do. In the old days, we would respond to suicide, but now we try to prevent suicide, which is kind of nice. Before we reacted to depression with electroshock therapy or whatever. Back in the 70s, Prozac, there was no Prozac. There were no SSRIs. There was tricyclics, there were, what else was there? That's about it. The tricyclics, so we were treating people with some really strong drugs that were fairly dangerous. Monoamine oxidase inhibitors were the other one. New terms that have entered the APA lexicon: comorbidity, when multiple states of disease occur simultaneously. If you read the DSM, there we are on number 5. During the 70s, we were on DSM-3. DSM-3, it was homosexuality was a mental illness, as weird as that sounds. I mean, today we've got a guy running for president who's gay. In 1970s, he would have been arrested and thrown in jail for admitting that he's gay. Okay. What? No? Yes?
It's not normal.
Well, that's just the way it was. I mean, things were a lot different back then. Thank God we're in the 2020s.
Do you think they're doing control population, like they're controlling the population with the coronavirus?
There's only 79,000 people worldwide with coronavirus. That's not controlling anybody's population. And who's going to die? I mean, you can't select who's going to die. You can't, like, give it to Corey because, you know, she causes so much trouble and she's got the wrong necklace on. So we'll off her. We can't do that. That doesn't work.
All right.
Okay, just a thought. No, it's not. It's not a means of population control. So comorbidity is when multiple states of disease occur simultaneously. So you can be depressed and you can also have anxiety, which is kind of exciting. Flourishing and psychological capital have been used to refer to the combined effects that predict wellness in the workplace: more hope, more optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience. And we're going to talk a lot about resilience. All of these are really positive attitudes that people need to have in order for them to feel like they can be successful in life. Co-vitality refers to the positive traits of well-being, self-confidence, and general health. When faced with adversity, Carver et al. In 2005 have identified 4 possible outcomes. Continued downward slide where you get sick and you just get worse. You don't ever get better. Survival with diminished capacity. So if you're ever in a traumatic situation, you'll never be any better than you are today. So you did survive, but unfortunately now you can't function very well. Eventual return to the adversity level of functioning. And then the last is resilience, and this is of course what we're looking at. Resilience, where the individual is stronger than they were before the adversity. Now this is really kind of interesting. Most people are resilient. And the reason we know that is because 9/11 occurred. 9/11 occurred and we had a guy named Bonanno who decided he was going to look at all the people that were affected by 9/11. Of course, there were millions of people in the United States affected by it, but these aren't the ones we're looking at. We're looking at the people that actually survived the attack in New York City. We're looking at their families. We're looking at the families of the people that didn't survive in New York City. We were trying to figure out how do people react to a really traumatic situation. And the answer was almost everybody was resilient. We don't understand grief in the United States. We hadn't understood grief. How are you supposed to act when somebody dies? How are you supposed to act?
Depends.
Who tells you how to act? Is it your mom? Is it your dad? Is it your buddy? Is it me? Is it your psych professor? Who tells you how to react when somebody dies?
The society that we're in.
Society, yeah. Society tells us how to react. It could be your mom, could be your dad, could be your grandparents. You know, you go to your dad's funeral, you don't cry, grandma smacks you in the back of the head. You should have cried. You need to grieve, you know, that kind of thing. It's what society tells you how to grieve. Different religions have different ways of grieving. You guys do it one way, the Hopi do it another way, the people up north do it a totally different way than you guys do. It all has to do with the circle of life as far as they're concerned, and the circle of life has to do with the powwows. They have different powwows during the year, and you have a year that you can stay out of the circle. But after a year, somebody will go and get you out of the crowd, or they'll go to your house and they'll make you dance back into the circle. That's what they do up north, which is kind of cool. I've seen people in those bunny slippers that somebody went and got, and they dance them back into the circle. And it's funny to me, of course, but to them, this is really serious stuff. This person's grieving too much, right? That's the way
And
they feel.
it's like with the Paiutes, I know that they have a half night or an all night scene,
Right.
and they give the family a year to grieve, and at the anniversary of the death, they do what's called a big time, and they gather up all their belongings and they
Give
burn
them
it.
away. Oh, they burn them? Okay. See, up north, they give them away. You give away everything. So if somebody had a favorite horse, they give the horse away. They can't keep it, is the idea. So that nobody inherits anything.
It was like that when my grandmother passed away. She got buried with all of her stuff.
Okay. All right, so you get rid of it.
Mhm.
Okay. But up north, they give it away. Which is, I mean, it's just a different way of doing things. I used to, of course, I worked with death for an extended length of time. What time is it? Okay. For an extended length of time. Catholics are really good at it. They're so good. They're like professional dead people. Processors. They're really good, because everybody's got a job, and everybody does their job, and, you know, the aunt does this, and the maternal uncle does something else, and everybody's got a job, and everybody takes care of the situation. They have a wake. It's just a different way of doing things. Presbyterians are god-awful. They are so horrible. The Baptists, oh jeez, these guys are so bad. Everybody cries. But in my family, nobody can cry. Nobody's supposed to cry. You're not supposed to cry. That's the way it worked. We weren't religious, but we weren't supposed to cry. But my brother-in-law was Catholic. So my dad dies. We're all sitting there in a line, you know, all the children, his children and his wife, we're all sitting there, and the spouses are standing behind us. And of course, they've never been to a Bradway funeral before, so they don't know what they're supposed to do. So we're sitting there, we're kind of cracking jokes and whatnot. My dad's, you know, in the casket, and we're all just sitting there, and we're not. And my brother-in-law just starts wailing. I mean, he just, and he hated my dad. I know. He didn't like my dad, and my dad didn't like him either. But he was just wailing, and he's the only person crying at the funeral. Was my brother-in-law. It was too funny. We all laughed. See, that was funny. My mom told us if anybody cries, she's going to smack us. That's what she told us. So we didn't. So what are we talking about? We're talking about resilience. We're talking about resilience. Thriving is a paradoxical resilience outcome in which adversity leads to greater psychological and physical well-being. Thriving occurs when the system breaks down, and then it is rebuilt stronger through exercise. And this is known as psychological bodybuilding, as weird as that is. But of course, I've got a bodybuilder here. I've got a picture of a bodybuilder. This isn't what I'm talking about. So you go through adversity, and if you are resilient, you will actually come back stronger than you were before. And that's a good thing. That's what society should support, this psychological bodybuilding. So that if you go through crap, you're going to come out stronger. And of course, we see this all the time. We see somebody that lost somebody, right? They lost a child. And now they are promoting anti-trafficking stuff. We've got that guy that his son was kidnapped and murdered, And he started a television show where they looked for missing children.
John Walsh.
Yeah, John Walsh. He's got a kind of a high voice, he's a little bitty short guy. Doesn't he have a high voice?
Yeah,
Okay.
but you know who's scary? That guy that used to do the Unsolved Mysteries. Robert Stack.
He's dead.
I know, I'm talking about back in the days.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
He has since died, so.
Mhm.
Okay. Psychological bodybuilding. And of course, wait, I had the guy, so let's have a girl. Okay, here we go. There we go, young lady. Well, so what's the difference between the left picture and the right picture? Here she is, she's just had some kind of a psychological problem, and now you can see how healthy she is.
She looks fine in the first picture. So it's psychological.
I know, she doesn't, yeah, you can see her stomach muscles on the left side, so she looks okay. What happened in the right side? Somebody painted her brown. You know what happened? Or orange, kind of like Donald Trump's face. They saw his hair blown back the other day, and he had this line.
Oh no.
I know. He puts on tanning lotion, or that
All
orange
that
tanning stuff.
money, I mean,
I know.
jeez.
I know. Money's more important than anything. Why don't we stop right here and I'll stop making fun of Donald Trump.